It's 6:30. We're going back into open session. We went into closed session to consult with counsel, obtain legal advice on a legal matter. We discussed the conflict of Open Meetings Act with the privacy of identifying persons with handgun permits. Second item we discussed, I've heard a lot of people wondering whether we get paid or not. I've only been on this since February. I've not ever gotten a paycheck. So anybody thinks we all have, I want to clarify that. I don't think anyone else has. We do get 47 cents a mile for my driving 72,000 miles and 1,000 hours of miles of traffic. Ms. Rhea Harris informed us she will be following up that in accordance with the regulations, we were supposed to be getting a stipend. I don't know if that includes back pay. I have no comments on it, but no, we have not been a paid board up until this time. Those are the items that we have discussed. We have 4 hearings tonight that are for a modification to a permit. We'll call those people up and they will have the option at their discretion whether we have it in open session or not. First case will be Mike Donahoe.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Would you please come up?
Yeah.
Would you like to have this in closed session or have this conducted in open session?
Open session is good.
Okay, please have a seat, sir. And would you give me your full name?
Michael Leonard Donahoe.
Michael Leonard Donahoe. And this one back to you. And do you have any witnesses with you tonight, sir?
No, sir, I do not.
And who for the state police will be testifying? Sergeant Linnell and Sergeant Blackwood. Please stand, sir. You all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth under the pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, please have a seat. Maryland State Police, you're first up. We have set time limits of 30 minutes. We've had a couple cases that ran over several hours. There will be maximum 10 minutes of testimony for the state police, 10 minutes of testimony from the applicant. There will be 5 minutes for each to wrap up. It'll be the chair's decision if there's some compelling reasons why we need to run over that time. Mr. Donahoe, please, or I'm sorry, Trooper Blackwood, would you please start? Fill that up, please.
Trooper Blackwood, State Police License Division. On June 23rd, 2015, the applicant, Michael Leonard Donahoe, submitted an original application to the Maryland State Police handgun permit section. On the application, question 23 states, the reason for the handgun permit, be specific. Mr. Donahoe states the following, quote, I require a handgun permit for the following reasons. 1, I am currently the owner of the Department of Defense Contracting Company, which does business in Cook, Maryland. 2, as a result of my business, I'm required to not only make high cash value deposits, but also carry business-related currency on me at all times, due to the nature of my business. 3, I carry as well as transport expensive business-related information, technology devices, as well as instances of communication. 4, I currently possess a valid top-secret, sensitive enforcement information security clearance, which heightens the risk of having danger when compared to other citizens who do not possess the security clearance that I do. 5, due to the recent hacking of the Office of Personnel Management OPM database, which I am a part of, that is currently being sold online, which contains all but not limited to the following information contained on the SF-86. A, current security clearance held. B, locations and address of work. C, location and address of home residence. D, physical descriptions as well as my immediate family members. E, previous military history. End quote. The application was reviewed and Mr. Donahoe was approved for a handgun permit. The permit was issued with the following restriction. Valid only while conducting business as owner of Valid Technologies Incorporated. Maryland only, not valid where firearms are prohibited. The restriction reflects the good and substantial reason for his handgun permit. While it is unknown why Mr. Donahoe appealed to the board, it is assumed that he is appealing his restriction on the permit. Mr. Donahoe mentioned in his application that he holds a top secret clearance and that he was the victim of an Office of Personal Management OPM hack. However, he did not provide any documentation to support his apprehended fear of the above mentioned. I understand that the application holds a top security clearance. However, millions of citizens hold clearances. I discussed both top secret clearances as well as the OPM hack with the Assistant Attorney General Mark Owen. And it is his understanding that such a clearance is awarded based on trustworthiness of the individual and their need to access restricted information. It is not awarded based on any assessment that they face a greater threat to their personal safety than any other citizen. These clearances, or what type of clearance an individual holds, are not released by the government. As far as the OPM hack, which he did provide that documentation that he was a victim of it. As far as the OPM hack, the fact that the applicant's personal information may have been compromised does not mean that they are at any great threat of physical attack. Generally, criminals seeking access to personal data want to use it for financial crimes, opening credit cards, accessing bank accounts, and do not physically attack someone. If Mr. Dino is concerned that the disclosure of his home address might lead to a criminal act, you would not need a permit to be armed in your own residence. The applicant also indicated to the investigator during the background investigation that he is concerned for safety due to terrorist attacks, recent terrorist attacks. Contact was made with the Maryland Information Analysis Center, MCAC, and the Terrorism Division as recent as January 13, 2016, and the Joint Terrorist Task Force, which is comprised of numerous federal, local, local and state law enforcement agencies, which include the FBI and the DoD, advise that there is no specific or credible threat to military members in the United States. As indicated in the Stoden decision, a person does not determine their own good substantial reason. As a result, there must be verifiable documentation to support a person's reason for a handgun permit. Having a top secret clearance or a data breach within itself is not documentation of a threat. Report and share indicates that major general threats do not meet a very substantial reason to grant a handgun permit. In essence, the applicant must be targeted directly, not just a member of society, or the potential of something happening may exist. Furthermore, in regards to the restriction, Maryland Public Safety Article 5-7 states, the Secretary may limit the geographic area, circumstances, or times of the day, week, or month, or year in which a permit is effective. The purpose of the restrictions is to tailor the use of the permit to the good and substantial reason for the applicant to be armed. Every permit issued contains a restriction which reflects that applicant's good and substantial reason for the handgun permit. The good and substantial reason requirement is constitutional and requires the applicant show that they have a reason to be armed under the circumstances where limited or unlimited for which they are seeking to be armed. Furthermore, if it had been the intent of the General Assembly for a person who was issued a permit to be armed at all times, it would not have enacted Public Safety Article 5-307. And it's the opinion of the Secretary of the Maryland State Police that the restriction given meets the established good and substantial reason for this permit.
Let me see the timer. As fast as you talk, I know you got
I didn't show that.
Okay, Mr.
Excuse me. You're filming, and you're filming under whose authority?
I was under the impression that this was open meetings and that it was not required to be under anybody's authority to film.
I don't think that there's a film.
There are several people currently recording audio. I don't understand the substantive difference between video and audio recording and simply audio recording.
I know that Mr. Neverdine insisted on that quite a few months ago. I don't know the legal status. Is that anything that you can comment on? Whether you can deal with video?
Is there anything other than the fact, is it merely the fact that he's video recording at all that's upsetting? Or do you have a...
Oh, I'm not upset. I didn't know that filming was permitted unless, just asking a question.
Okay, well,
I know that Mr. Neverdine had said something about this being a state building and security, so I'm not versed into making a decision on that. Is Russell Loteria still there?
if you wish to permit the filming, you certainly can. If it's not bothering you, I don't,
Okay, I'm only, there was, like I said, there was something Mr. Neverdine said about this being in the state correctional facility building, but I'm just referring that to you. If you're fine with it, I'm fine with it.
all right.
Well, again, though, does this have, does this create a problem with identifying the individual who is presenting himself, and now everybody in the room And now, depending on where that film goes, everybody's gonna have a picture of him.
I give consent.
You gave consent.
I do.
You do now.
I do not.
Okay. Should we ask each individual whether they give consent to be filmed in this light?
Yeah, I have no problem with that either.
Other than that, I don't care if they take my picture. So much such that it is.
Okay, Mr. Donovan, please continue.
No, please. So I have documentation here that was given to me by OPM stating that I was actually in fact a victim of that perpetrated database hack. The documentation was not available at the time of my initial application. I do have 5 copies of that with the board this evening if you'd like to have that. In addition, so I'm also, let me slow down here for a second. I applied under multiple good and substantial reasons as the troopers indicated. During the time of my permit being granted, I was not ever given a justification as to why those other good and substantial reasons that I felt were valid were not addressed at the time of my approval letter. Second, I have some supporting documentation in order to go ahead and show that A, I have been a victim of that database hack, as well as multiple instances, or 2 instances, one being a National Institute of Science and Technology's federal employee who was actually put on an ISIS hit list, with the FBI providing her 24-hour security for being on such a list. The second one is a Maryland man dated December 14th, who actually had ties to ISIS, which was arrested by the FBI. So I'm not sure why the troopers have presented forward that there were never ever any instances of these types of occurrences in Maryland, because I have 2 from December this 2015. Fairly recent. In addition to that, I have some questions pertaining to the validity, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous with public speaking.
Yeah, you're doing fine.
The validity of the restrictions themselves. It's very ambiguous restrictions, and those restrictions they can be interpreted any way. And the problem that I have with the restriction is this: it's while conducting official business as the owner and operator of my company, my media company. I have a problem with the ability of a law enforcement officer who has no insight into my business whatsoever, being able to detain me on the side of the road and apply a felony charge against me whenever my livelihood depends upon me keeping my business clean, just because the ambiguous term while conducting official business. I think that those restrictions need to be validated, not validated, but a little bit more clear-cut than a blanket overarching restriction. My second question, though, is I don't understand what makes me more of a threat, public safety threat, without any restrictions than this ambiguous restriction, blanket restriction being out there. What evidence does the Maryland State Police have that quantifies me as more of a public threat with no restrictions than as a public threat right now with a restriction out there? I don't understand that. I don't understand the difference that I have between conducting official business and carrying a firearm, between a personal errand and carrying a firearm. Either way, I'm still an individual carrying a firearm. There should be no difference there between me having a heightened threat to public safety or not. And I'd like to ask the Maryland State Police to actually provide their case against me as to why I am more of a threat without any restrictions, opposed to with restrictions at this time. In addition, good and substantial is defined as something that is quantifiable outside of my own personal paranoia. I'm also asking if I'm the only applicant to which is provided these reasons as good and substantial evidence, or good and substantial reasons. If I'm not the only applicant that has used these as good and substantial reasons, then that now exists outside of my own personal paranoia, and does that not qualify as good and substantial reason?
From your other document here, I was reading.
And you guys can have these copies. I have multiple copies if needed.
Yeah, the person who had been the assistant is not with the board anymore. Typically, every board member would have a full file. Currently, right now, we're sharing one.
I also have, what's her last name? What? I don't know what the last name is. Yeah, I've actually requested her, have multiple copies of my file for the board to be able to have in front of them during my time tonight. I have those emails here. Apparently that didn't happen.
I want to address just one thing, just because you have it in your document, one part of your testimony. You had in here that on August 18th, that we had overturned a similar decision by the MSP. All I can tell you is it was under a previous chairman, and the opinion letter was either not written or written incorrectly or rejected by the state police. And it's a hearing that's coming back. It's going to be reheard. There was no voice recording of it.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I'm just clarifying so you know that there isn't a, something just because we overturned this board, it still hasn't finished the process. And then with the new, myself being the new chairman, and going back and reviewing all the cases and persons that hadn't received their letter, we find that it's one of the ones that's missing, and there's not enough documentation to get a finding on it from us.
Okay.
So we have to go back through that just a minute.
Understandable.
Questions from the board?
In the OPM database hacking, was your security clearance renewed?
Everything about me. So within my original application, I provided what is called the SF-86. What that is that's where I have to fill out every 5 years in order to have all my information updated for the OPM database. It has the offices to which I've worked out of from a federal perspective. It has my current clearance access. It has everything about my life for the past 15 years, including traffic fines over $250. It's everything. It's my wife's social security number and identification markings. It's my children's. It's what they look like. It's their age. It's their hair color. It's everything. It is a 96-page document of my life for the past 15 years. Inside of that document also indicates the agency of which I was out of. I've been out of NSA. I've been out of DIA, Army INSCOM, and the United States Air Force. There's a lot of things in this document, in this data graph, that pertain to me from a professional level as well as a personal level.
We've had this other persons before, it's not just the NSA, military personnel and former intelligence agency personnel, so OPM hack, and I'm familiar with it. I'm a victim of it myself.
Yeah, it's not a real settling feeling. It's pretty uneasy to be quite honest with you. The amount of information taken.
I wanted, I just need to see the front page.
While you're looking for that, may I ask another question?
Yes, sir. The
As a
board
business
has asked
owner,
questions.
is there any time when you're not working for your company?
I'm on the clock 24/7, sir. 24/7, 365. Business arises at any time. From carrying a cell phone to carrying a laptop to carrying a checkbook, I am constantly working. There is never a time to which I'm not, and my wife can attest to that as well.
I know, I'm a business owner too.
Just one for the state police. I still personally find it a little incredulous that now after what happened in California, the statement that there is no specific or credible threats to military members in the United States. And I know it's not coming from you personally, it's coming from MCAC, but
Sorry to inject here, but I provided 2 instances where a NIST employee in Rockville was targeted on an ISIS hit list, as well as a Edgewood, Maryland individual being arrested by the FBI for providing communication burner phones and laptops to ISIS. That's documented. That's an FBI case. So for the Maryland State Police to come in here and say that that is not the case, these happened in the past month of December 2015. These are recent occurrences. This is fresh on everyone's mind. Are you familiar with these instances?
All I can say is that when we checked with them, it is a joint task force, and said, who's all in this? FBI, yes. DOD, yes, they're all part of this.
FBI is providing 24/7 security for the NIST employee. 24/7 security detail. Based upon her information, being taken from the OPM data hack and now being injected into an ISIS hit list. That's the only place that information could have come from. And I really don't think homegrown extremists are going to make a different, they're not going to differentiate between DOD, NIST, NSA. If they can get someone affiliated with the U.S. government providing some type of mission support, that's a win. That's low-hanging fruit. And to rebut what the Maryland police said about me being able to defend my own home, correct. Again, they're not going to come at me whenever I can be. They're going to come for me, or anyone for that matter, when I'm not. Knowing the laws of Maryland, which I'm sure they're accustomed to, it's going to be when I'm at my most vulnerable state, outside of my home. Outside of my dwelling, which I am the only one that knows better than anyone else, where I can have my own personal protection. The Maryland State Police also quoted Sheridan's, what were the two cases? Snowden? Correct. So Heller and McDonald should have invalidated those two decisions being upon their Supreme Court rulings. What was the year that Snowden and Sher was ruled on? In the 70s.
1980 and 2005.
So we have Supreme Court rulings which invalidate those two court cases. So I don't believe that that has any, those two court cases I feel as though don't have any weight in this decision tonight. They're invalidated.
Any other questions from the board?
I also had a question to the Maryland State Police, which makes me more of a public safety threat with restrictions opposed to without. Can you answer that for me tonight? As well as provide evidence based upon the handgun permit review board SOP. I came here under the impression that the Maryland State Police had to provide evidence against me as to why I should not have an unrestricted permit, opposed to me making the case as to why I should. Do you have that evidence tonight?
In the rules and responsibilities, the appellant does have the right to ask the state police questions as you can ask them.
Do you have that?
Respectfully, the Maryland State Police doesn't interpret whether you're more of a significant threat, public safety-wise, if you have an unrestricted or restricted permit. The permit is restricted based upon whatever the good and substantial reason that's determined from the investigation. That was what was provided to us. Your permit is crafted so that you can carry during the conditions under which the good and substantial reasons are met. It was determined that your business activities were met, the good and substantial requirements. It was determined that the information you provided regarding the ISIS threats and the OPM hack did not meet the good and substantial. You didn't receive any notification of that because you didn't receive a denial or disapproval. You received an approval. It just wasn't for everything that you requested.
Can you provide that? Can you provide evidence tonight for the case for the board showing that those were not actual good and substantial reasons?
That was a determination that was made by the investigation.
Can,
Trooper Lasnik explained why the basis for that decision was made based upon our coordination with MCAC, was made based upon the information that you provided.
so that coordination is already determined faulty. That's not.
I don't respectfully, I disagree.
So the documents that I provided to the board, you're
Which
saying
I
are
don't
inaccurate.
have, which I don't have, sir.
Can I have a copy, please, back? So the Edgewood, Maryland arrest of a man for $9,000 with ties to ISIS, that never happened?
I didn't say that it never happened.
And the NIST employee who was named on an ISIS hit list that was provided at FBI security 24/7, that's inaccurate as well?
I didn't say that either, sir.
Okay, well, I provided evidence as to why that is accurate.
I would assume that the Maryland Coordinated Analysis Center would have access to this information if it's public knowledge and it's in the Washington Times and the Washington Post. That's where we get our information from because they have the clearance to be able to provide us with that documentation. Are we saying that there's no threats? No. But the documentation that was provided is there's no credible, specific threats, specifically targeting members of the military. That's what was.
But I've just provided evidence stating the opposite.
Well, then you can argue that, sir, with MCAC. I'm just telling you what MCAC tells us. We don't have the clearance to provide that documentation.
I'm not here to argue with MCAT, I'm here to provide my case to the board.
I understand.
Whereas your case should be providing against me. I shouldn't be proving my case at this point based on SOP. Accurate?
I want to, because asking questions and getting into the debate, I don't want to do right now. Mr. Lehman, in the rules and responsibilities of the, in the Department of Public Safety for the Handgun Permit Review Board, in paragraph 2, it states that the burden of proof is on the Maryland State Police. And that's, could that it's on the website, it's been that way since I've ever been on the board. That was one of the things that he brought up about them having the burden of proof. Is that the case? I asked you for legal advice in session, and I can provide you that document if you like.
I don't have the document in front of me, but I'm sure it says what you.
Yeah, for the board, I mean, I just want to verify, it says the burden of proof is on Maryland State Police, is that correct?
I believe that is a correct statement of the policy.
Okay.
So I have nothing else. That being said,
I have a question.
sure.
Mr. Donahue, you had said, say, police asked you, or someone asked, how often do you work during the day, or what area?
That was the gentleman here.
Okay, and your answer was, I think, 24/7.
That's correct.
On call 24/7 for the most part,
That's correct. I'm constantly working on proposals.
right?
I'm constantly doing business development. I'm constantly looking for new employees. I'm constantly looking for employment, not employment, but,
Your business development.
correct,
Okay.
new business development. I'm constantly doing those things. I'm constantly fostering relationships with other large businesses, being a small business to large business. These things occur constantly. I'm constantly checking my email all the time.
So basically, you're working all the time. As you said, your wife isn't really happy with that.
Right.
correct? So, you're working all the time.
Could, okay.
You're on duty all the time.
My problem though with that is this. I do not want to be on the side of a road somewhere, speaking to a state trooper, sheriff, city officer, trying to convince this person who has no insight into my business, financially, or what I do on a day-to-day basis, trying to convince them not to put me in the back of the car in handcuffs while we sort things out, while my wife and children are in my car, waiting on me. I'm not okay with the possibility of someone's arbitrary interpretation of my business leading to me having a felony arrest, which I now have to go prove in court, because the officer is going to err on that side of caution. He's not going to try and interpret the law. He's going to make a determination based upon what he has in front of him at that point in time, whether my word being good as it is or not, and then he can let it go to a judge. That's what I don't want to have, because if that happens, that now impacts me from a business standpoint, financial standpoint, and a security and a livelihood standpoint, because my security clearance needs me to be an honest person out there and do what's right.
I think we discussed before, though, that Maryland State Police, yes, we definitely have some officers out there who need to be more informed, but for the majority of officers, I don't think that their tactic is going to be
Agreed.
behind.
Understand.
I mean, they have said that in the past,
Yes.
that they will not, they're not gonna just, you
The
know.
Maryland State Police may not. And understand, and they have a very difficult job. My family in Pennsylvania, I have state troopers in my family for PA.
Right.
But what about the small town in Maryland I'm going through? What about the county, the small county that may not be up to speed on those types of actions?
Right.
They may have a guy in a car with his wife and children who may not be determined on official business. Now he's carrying outside the boundaries of his permit. That's the instance that I'm worried about here. It's not necessarily the Maryland State Police not being able to apply it appropriately. It's the small town police and the small jurisdictions out there who may not have that insight into the Maryland State Police. Now that puts me in a bad position where I now have to go to court on a felony charge. Within my line of work, I have to prove, I have to report everything. $250 speeding tickets, let alone a felony arrest, felony weapons arrest. I could lose my clearances on the spot based on something like that.
Yeah,
A
wasn't
clearance
there-
is not a right, it's a
Can I make a
privilege.
point?
Sure.
Because I remember something before. If he should have gotten stopped by someone other than state troopers, is there something in place where they would actually check his information? They're gonna check his license and so they're gonna check against that and ask questions, correct? And then they're gonna come back and say, well, no, he's fine, and let him go. It's a basically, I mean, if he's not doing anything illegal.
But I am doing something illegal if the officer interprets that as me carrying outside the boundaries of my permit.
No, what I'm saying is that they can actually, that they actually check it to see, you know, that's the impression I got, that they will actually call and say, you know, is he okay? You know, And I was told basically they're gonna tell you you're fine, because you're doing business, you are doing business. Because you said you're doing business 24/7.
I don't have something like that in writing. And for my line of work, I need something definitive. I need it black and white. I can't have it as, call the state police, hang out here in the back of the car until you determine who you are, what your business is. The Maryland State Police does not know their business. They don't. I've provided them information, and that's not a dig on the Maryland State Police. This is my line of work, as if I don't have any insight into law enforcement. I don't. I know what's my line of work. I know what my business is. Police, law enforcement, anyone else for that matter does not. I think that's a pretty fair statement.
Okay, we're over the 30-minute limit here.
And I'm done. I would just like to rebut with the one trooper on the right side. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but
Sergeant Bonnell.
so what the sergeant put forward is, so the report that they provided the board tonight that they read off, that is not evidence for them proving their case against me. It's not. And I close with that.
Okay, just want to remind the board that we have to look at each case individually and base it on an apprehended danger greater than his own personal anxiety. You've stated a lot of reasons why it's more than your personal anxiety. It's up to the board to make a motion on this.
You stated that other applicants have already come forward with these same reasonings, correct?
Yes, they have.
So that now exists outside of my own personal government, I would say.
Yes, sir. I would agree with that. We have some very high-ranking, high-level military personnel and retired CA. Yes, I personally agree with you on that. Do I have a motion?
Before you do that, I just want to clarify what I said earlier. You asked about the DPSCS policy regarding the burden of proof.
Yes, sir.
The written policy, which you quoted to me, does say that MSP bears the burden of proof. That is the policy on the website, and that's what I meant when I said that is the policy. I just want to point out that I believe what your question was, and I'm going to answer what I think your question was, and you can tell me if I had it wrong, that the board has to determine if the applicant has a good and substantial reason, and that is separate and apart from the DPSCS policy regarding the burden of proof. That's the state law.
I find that very ambiguous when you say that, because I mean, when they have the burden of proof convincing the majority of the board, I understand the good and substantial reasons, and as I just stated, apprehended danger greater than his own personal anxiety. But if it's not an accurate statement, why do we have it? Would be my rebuttal to that. If these troopers are coming in here under the premise that the applicant has the burden of proof, and the DPS tells the board the state police has the burden of proof, there's a major issue in how we have to review these cases.
I agree.
So I'm not sure I understand your statement. Yes, you're acknowledging it's there on the website, but does the Maryland State Police have the burden of proof to this board to prove their case that this gentleman is not, should be denied a modification to his permit?
I would say that the board is charged with hearing the applicant and the state police and making a determination as to whether the applicant has a good and substantial reason. The policy on the website, which has the burden of proof, is a DPSCS. I'm not sure if it's a policy or a directive. I'm not really sure what. It's a policy. Thank you. But the state law is good substantial reason, and that's what that is. So I understand it's inconsistent.
We'll have mixed emotions on this. I think that Mr. Donahue would qualify as owner of the business carrying large amounts of cash or a business-related restricted permit. When you put on top of that the OPM database compromise and the fact that his clearance has been, is a part of that, I think that he has a reason over and above the ordinary to have an apprehension of impending danger and possible confrontation. So I move that we direct the state police to remove the restrictions from this license.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Georgina to overturn the Maryland State Police and modify Mr. Donahoe's permit to an unrestricted permit. Do I have a second on that motion? I'll second that motion. We have a second on the motion by the chairman, Robert Wilson. Any other further debate or discussion? Okay, and all in favor of the motion, show your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, 4 in the affirmative. Congratulations, sir, you'll be issued a non-restricted permit.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Next case is Byron Black.
Brian Black. Member of the board, it's Brian Black, not Brian Black. And President of Council, I'm Eric Chambers, Attorney Record. Previously filed in this business case.
Thank you.
Your reports. Absolutely.
Written entry. File this.
Have file this.
My client has no objection to this being videotaped while we recorded. And with the
All right, just bear with me for a minute because I always try to get things accurate here. You're Eric Chambers, attorney representing Brian Black. Okay, I'm just looking at all these documents, they all say Beat Byron. So I have typos every year.
So it's actually BYR.
All right,
I hate to do this again. I just want to again clarify the distinction in policy between an applicant, a new applicant, and a person who is already permitted to have a handgun. As I said before, the state law is good and substantial. This policy regards modifications of individuals who have a permit and are challenging the restriction as opposed to a new permit in general. So, good and substantial is state law. This is a DPSCS policy which places the burden of proof on MSP.
in the case of modification.
Members, may I take 30 seconds to address that?
I want to get everybody sworn in here first before.
Okay, but I'd like to address that since it's part of this hearing.
Yes, sir, absolutely, I agree.
Okay.
Who will be testifying with this, please? Just yourself, sir. Okay, anyone will be testifying, any other witnesses you may have? Any other witnesses you may
No,
have?
thank you.
Okay, just for the record, just state your full name, sir.
Brian Clifford.
Okay. And Sergeant Aaron Knott. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth under the pain and penalty of perjury?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Sergeant Knott.
Okay, may I just stress what counsel said on the record? Because I don't think that's entirely correct, and I think with all due respect to counsel, the board needs to know exactly what the standard is when it reviews.
Been trying to do that for 9 months.
Public Safety 5-312E covers generally these sort of proceedings. That statute says that these proceedings are covered by the Administrative Procedures Act, which is State Government 10. State Government 10-213 very clearly states what the, 217 very clearly states what the standard of proof is in any contested case, and whether it's contested for denial of issuance of a permit, or in this case, we're here for appealing of restrictions. The standard's exactly the same. The standard is the preponderance of the evidence
and that the agency could maintain this decision, in this case, and the statute uses secretary and superintendent interchangeably in Iowa. In this case, the agency that made this ruling has the burden of proving by preponderance of evidence that their actions are correct. And again, that's State Government 10-217.
Sergeant Dodd, yes, no, sir. 12 after.
On August 24th, 2015, permit holder Brian Clinton Black submitted a modification request to Maryland State Police Handbook Permit Section. Mr. Black advised in the request, in light of the handgun permit review board's decision on Eric Schaefer, he would like an unrestricted permit as well. He did not supply any documentation to substantiate his request for an unrestricted permit. Mr. Black's current permit has the following restriction: valid only between residents Schaefer, Black, and Flores, or while actively involved in financial or business transactions as partner or owner of same Maryland only, not valid where firearms are prohibited. Assistant Attorney General Mark Bowen was contacted to determine if the Schaefer decision set a precedent or if cases cited by Mr. Schaefer changed the existing case law. Mr. Bowen advised that the Maryland appellate cases Snowden and Scherer were decided prior to the Supreme Court's decision in Heller and McDonald. But because the Court of Special Appeals decisions did not turn on the application of the Second Amendment to the question of whether the applicant had a good and substantial reason to wear, carry, or trade a handgun, the rulings in the Snowden and Scherer cases have not been invalidated by Heller and McDonald. The Snowden and Scherer decisions turned on the question of whether the board's decision that the applicant had not shown good and substantial reason was supported by substantial evidence, not whether the good substantial reason requirement violated the Second Amendment. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on the constitutionality of the good substantial reason requirement in the Ward decision. This decision is the controlling federal case on Maryland's law, and Maryland's law was deemed constitutional. Mr. Bowen further expounded that Public Safety 5307 allows the Secretary to limit the geographic area, circumstances, or times of day, week, month, or year in which a permit is effective. The purpose of the restrictions is to tailor the use of the permit to the good substantial reason to be armed. If the applicant can substantiate by independent means other than the applicant stating so, that they face threats substantially greater than that of the general public, and those threats can occur at any place or time, then the applicant has demonstrated a good substantial reason to be armed at any time and would be issued an unrestricted permit. If the applicant's good substantial reason to be armed arises from their business activities, then it's appropriate to restrict the permit to those activities. In such a case, the applicant does not have a good substantial reason to be armed at all times. Had it been the intent of the General Assembly that any reason supporting the issuance of a handgun permit would justify the applicant to be armed at all times, it would not have enacted Public Safety 5307. The good substantial reason requirement is constitutional and requires the applicant to show they have reason to be armed under the circumstances for which they are seeking to be armed. To fulfill this requirement requires independent means to substantiate the circumstances. We are not bound by law to allow a person to determine their own good and substantial reason. They cannot take their word for it. Documentation must be present. To date, Mr. Black has not provided documentation of anything other than the businessman as an attorney. Is the opinion of Secretary of the Maryland State Police, the restriction reflects his good substantial reason to be armed, and there is no basis to modify the restriction to unrestricted.
Thanks. Mr. Schaefer.
Sergeant, Mr. Black appealed this after getting his current permit, his reissuance permit, is that correct?
He had a permit.
Correct. How many times has he had a permit?
Don't know.
Okay. Do you have what his prior restrictions are on his permit?
It was the,
That has to be marked.
the one between residents, Jason Black and Flores Law Office, Bank of Territory Business Currency as partner of same. That was from 2009.
And that language is different than the language you just testified to on the current permit. You agree?
Correct, it was slightly different, yes.
I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 1, ask if you can identify that document.
This is a permit from 99.
99 through 2002, correct?
Correct.
And that's an unrestricted permit. Says restrictions
Correct.
none, correct?
Correct.
What, okay. And do you have the language of any of the intervening permits between that?
I do not. This I don't have that.
Would you be surprised to learn that every time he gets a permit, there's either no restrictions or the restrictions are different?
I can't testify to that, I'm not.
Would you be surprised to learn that's the question? Not really.
I couldn't tell.
Okay. And in this permit, in this situation, what specific facts did the Maryland State Police find that warrant imposing a restriction on this permit, particularly Mr. Black?
She's showing articles of incorporation, bank deposits for Schaefer, Black, and Flores. Nothing showing other than business.
Well, those are towards good and substantial, right? And you can see that he's met a good and substantial reason to have a permit under Maryland law.
As a business owner, correct?
Well, not as a business owner, it doesn't say anything about why you get it. In fact, the statute only says like 8 things you need to clear to get a good and substantial reason, right?
It doesn't specify that those are good subjects, that just means that you are qualified to have it.
Right. You have to be an adult, correct? Right. Cannot be then convicted of a disqualifying crime, correct? Cannot have been convicted of a crime involving CDS, correct? Correct. Can't be present in alcohol or habitual use or controlled dangerous substance, correct? Completed training or exempt from the training requirement, correct? Undergone investigation, background check by the Maryland State Police indicates he has not exhibited propensity for violence or instability that render his possession of a handgun in a public danger to himself or to others, correct? And has undergone investigation by the Maryland State Police indicates he has a good and substantial reason to wear, carry, transport a handgun, correct? Correct. Any criteria I left out, based on your training experience?
No, that was correct. He has a good substantial reason as a business owner. 5307 allows us that capacity to restrict. And that's what the General Assembly, when they enacted 307, was.
Well, actually, 5307 says may, right?
It's been
It is
enacted
not.
since 1972.
Well, just let me finish the question. 5307 says may restrict time, place, and manner, correct? So my question again is, what individualized factors pertaining to Mr. Black in this case did you make a determination that warrant restricting his permit?
We tailor the restriction to the good substantial reason for the permit.
Now, in his application, he also referenced a Frederick County Sheriff's report of a documented death threat. Did you investigate that?
There was nothing provided to us.
Do you have the application in front of you?
I'd like to point out for the record also, the folder that we were given by the admin assistant doesn't have an application in it. All he has is
Well, I'll do it on case in chief, I was in that case. Did you give me a copy?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you page 6 of 10 of the application, what I believe to be the application. Correct. And it says where he has a documented death threat, he cites a case number. Frederick County Sheriff, so it's case number 12. Okay. Did you investigate that?
We did not. We provided no documentation for that. Every documentation that he gave us was as a business owner.
That's all I have for this witness, thank you. I have a couple things I'd like to submit.
If you could just give us, because we're seeing something for the first time here right now in the application, it wasn't provided. Ms. Harris, all we had was the, plus we only had a single copy. Now, C-23, I was reading the state police statement, Okay, I just want to clarify something. The answer to the question 23 years, you're Assistant State's Attorney for Frederick County? You're Assistant State's Attorney?
Yes, I will.
And then you did prosecutions?
Absolutely.
Felonies?
Yes, and that's actually who the death threat came from, was removed by prosecutors twice.
There should be an email attached, there was an email attached to the
Yes,
application.
sir. We have a copy of the brief, and we have just the letter from, that's all we were provided. So
Corporal West with a.
we don't have the time to run over, so we try and get all the facts here, sir.
This should be in the application. This is the email from my client and Corporal Jason West of Frederick County Sheriff's Department regarding that. It was someone who prosecuted the Boy Scout massacre.
That was in this application or prior?
It was in, well, but on the client testified.
It was in this application.
And the other thing I'd like the board just to introduce, because it's a little confusing, is this is actually the letter of appeal, the notice of appeal, which I guess you don't have. That's August 19th, 2014. This, I don't know why we're here. He's actually closer to the renewal of his permit than the issue of his permit as we're here today. But I just didn't want the board to, he appealed these restrictions immediately within the time frame. It was a timely appeal. In fact, he submitted, which I guess you don't have, a copy of the memorandum of appeal. along with
These
that
are
as
the only
well.
two items that we do have.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you these back to you, because you do have this one.
Just briefly, hear from my client. Mr. Black, tell the members of the board the threat you received.
It was a gentleman that I prosecuted on 2 occasions. The first time resulted in a mistrial and was prosecuted. The second time, he represented himself. After he was convicted, I believe the judge imposed incarceration on him. He was a mentally unstable individual, I would state myself. He called my work, left a message for me. He said, I remember you, I now found where you are. I remember what you did to me, and people like you end up dead. I made a recording, I took it over to the sheriff's department. They took it as a valid threat against me at that time. They did the investigation of that. That was he's now Sergeant West, conducted the investigation, provided me with the report number, which was provided to the state police with my application. It was referenced in my answer to the question as to why I believe I needed it as well. So the case number was referenced in my application as well, and a copy of the email was attached.
And you've had a number of permits, Mr. Black, is that correct?
Correct.
Has the language ever been, or restrictions ever been the same on any permit?
Never.
And that first permit we introduced from the state police, the timeframe October 12, 1999 to September 30, 2002, that was after you left the state's attorney's office.
That's correct.
That was when you were in private practice, so you had an unrestricted one in private practice.
That's correct.
You also have a permit from 2 other jurisdictions, is that correct?
I have a permit from Pennsylvania and from Utah.
Those are both non-resident permits,
They are both non-resident.
and there's no restrictions on either of those.
No restriction of fuel.
I'd introduce those as licensees exhibits as well, Your Honor. Members of the board. I have no additional evidence, but I would like to hear an argument provided for by the rules.
They haven't seen the whole folder yet, so we'll give them a few minutes here if you would, sir.
I don't challenge that you had threats against you due to your position, but I don't see the case referenced in your application anywhere, unless I just overlooked it. And I'm saying that only because I'm sure the state police probably didn't see you.
He referenced it in, under question 23.
23?
Page 10, I think, of the application.
Page 16, but I did not have the copy of the email from the the nature of the threat, and the case number, and the agency of all actions in my application.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Very briefly, and I appreciate the indulgence in this case. I certainly understand Sergeant Malva's honing the field he is given in this case, but with all due respect, I believe the state police is mistaken in this case. Once good and substantial has been shown, it is then the preponderance of the evidence to show that these restrictions have any relevance, or that there's a good and rational basis for relevance. Quite frankly, saying that every business owner automatically gets these restrictions is the exact antithesis of discretion. Exercising no discretion is not exercising discretion in any way, shape, or form. I would respectfully suggest that the state has the burden of showing the particularized facts why public safety will be affected. And I certainly agree that under Public Safety 5307, the Secretary is given permission by the legislature, but he's not given permission to do whole classes of license. In other words, all business owners get this, all white people get this, anything like that. Say, for example, around the NBA. If there was a rule by the NBA that said, well, everyone over 65 is probably retired, so they're not allowed to drive after dark, the NBA does have a legal authority to restrict licenses for health reasons and stuff. That's not an exercise of discretion. In this case, the state police is not exercising discretion. They could not give one particular reason why public safety is enhanced by imposing the restrictions. What we're asking for is the board to order the state to issue this language on the back, which is essentially what they're doing, which says none, male, no, not valid or firearms are prohibited by law. I'm asking the board to add the by law part, because the state police has been issuing permits that simply say prohibited, and the question is prohibited by whom? If your neighbor says you can't carry a gun, is that prohibited? It should be prohibited by law. Certainly there are restrictions in the statute and in COMAR where you cannot carry a firearm. We're asking the board to order the state police to issue Mr. Blackwood a license with those essential restrictions on the back.
I'd like to
I'll
point
go to that point as far as by law, it says not prohibited because private citizens can restrict on their own property, or businesses can restrict saying that they don't want it be armed on their property. And that's why it's left at that, not necessarily by law, but each property owner has that right to restrict the wear and tear on their own property.
Well, actually, they don't. There's no law, unlike some other states that say businesses can borrow. No law is such in that Maryland. The only thing a property owner do is if they learn you're carrying concealed, they can ask you to leave, and if you refuse to leave, you're guilty of trespass. There's no legislative authority with respect to the bar concealed carry permits from public businesses.
Okay, we're at 15 minutes. I just want to point out to the board, there's a precedence for, in the past, it was probably one of the first meetings we were in this building, so I'm going to say probably March or April, we had two different attorneys that were represented by counsel. One had been a former assistant state's attorney, and another one was a former state's attorney, and now was doing criminal defense work. And in both of those cases, it was the same request for modifications. One of them had been detained on the side of the road for a period of time, and also discussed the problems with the wording of Senate Bill 213 and regarding persons with a handgun permit being outside the guidelines of their permit. And in both of those cases, the board unanimously overturned the state police and went with no restrictions for those. So we have had cases very similar to this. Gentleman's has been an assistant state's attorney, has prosecuted felons, and people get out of jail later and do bad things. Any other discussion on the board? Any other questions? Do I have any motion from the board?
I think that we modify his license to unrestricted.
We have a motion on the floor from Ms. West to remove the business restrictions to go to a no restriction license with the appropriate legal language from the state police regarding where firearms are not legally allowed. Do I have a second on that motion?
I do.
Mr. Drugina seconds that motion. All in favor, vote of aye, and raise your hand, please. Aye. Any against? None. For in the affirmative, motion passes. Thanks, sir. Next case is Carlos Rabanales. Did I get that right? Mr. Al, am I pronouncing it right? Rabanales. Are you in attendance, sir? Okay. The next case is Nathan Siegel. Mr. Nathan Siegel. And your full name, sir?
Nathan Davis Siegel.
Okay. And will be testifying for the state, please? Leslie. Gentlemen, both rise, take the oath, please. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pain and penalty of perjury. Trooper?
Chicago State Police Licensing Division. On May 5th, 2015, the applicant Nathan Lewis Siegel submitted an original application in the Maryland State Police Handgun Permit section. On the application, question 23 states reason for handgun permit, be specific. Mr. Siegel states the following, quote, sales operations engaged Arvin LLC responsible for 1, opening and closing of retail storefront, firearms retailer, regular firearms dealer, and maintaining retail storefront operations on a day-to-day basis. 2, transportation of regulated firearms on behalf of business. This includes transportation of firearms for delivery to other regulated firearms dealers, transportation of custom firearms for testing and repair, etc. 3, making deposits on behalf of the LLC. 4, transferring business currency for the purpose of paying vendors and suppliers. Based on the aforementioned, I have a level of apprehended apprehended danger more than the average person would encounter. I'm requesting non-restricted permit. If my permit is restricted, I respectfully request that in addition to the standard restriction regarding active engagement in business transactions, my restriction also covers the transportation/possession of business property, such as property, all of it includes firearms, handguns, rifles, shotguns, machine guns, etc., and ammunition, and would be put the public at a greater danger if such property were to be lost or stolen.
Trooper, I have to interrupt you for a
Sure.
minute because I made a mistake.
Okay.
Are you okay with this being an open session?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you have any objection to it being filmed? No. Okay, continue.
All right. The application was reviewed on July 22nd, 2015, and Mr. Siegel was approved of the Maryland handgun permit. The permit was issued with the following restriction: valid only between residents, engaged armament, or while actively involved in financial business transactions / transporting business firearms / property as employee of the same. Basically what you want to do is, if you have a restriction today, covered it all. Maryland, only not valid where firearms prohibited. The restriction reflects the substantial reason for this handgun permit. While it is known while Mr. Siegel has appealed to the board, it is assumed there is a restriction on the permit. Public Safety Article 5-07 states, quote, the Secretary may limit the geographic area, circumstances, or time of the day, week, month, or year in which a permit is effective, end quote. The purpose of the restriction is to tailor the use of the permit to the good and substantial reason for the applicant to be armed. Every permit issue contains a restriction which reflects the applicant's good and substantial reason for the handgun permit. The good and substantial reason requirement is constitutional and requires that the applicant show that they have a reason to be armed under the circumstances, whether limited or unlimited, for which they are seeking to be armed. Furthermore, had it been the intent of the General Assembly for any person who is issued a permit to be armed at all times, it would not have acted Public Safety Article 5-37. Also to be considered is Public Safety Article 5-312A1, which states, quote, a person who is denied a permit or renewal of a permit, or whose permit is revoked or limited, may request the board to review the decision of the Secretary by filing a request with the board within 10 days of the receipt within the notice of the Secretary's final action, end quote. Mr. Siegel's permit was mailed on July 27th. If the board did not receive a written request within 10 days of this date, there is no basis for this review. It is the opinion of the Secretary of the Maryland State Police that the restriction given meets his established good and substantial reason for this handgun permit.
All the testimony, sir? Mr. Siegel, please.
So initially, I just wanted to point out that as in the document provided with the initial permit application, I work for a company called Engage Armament LLC. My permit as issued is to Engage Armament, which is a forfeited DBA. So it's actually unclear to me whether or not I am ever within the restrictions of my permit because they are two separate entities. Basis for my argument is that my restrictions are unclear and under-inclusive. They're vague and seem to be relatively subjective in nature. A lot of situations in which I believe MSP has found me to have a good and substantial reason are not covered by the permit, and it's also, again, not clear what is covered. With carrying outside of the current restrictions, now a crime, the same as carrying without a permit, that's very important to me. Not only would it risk me being disbarred, it would risk me going to jail. At this point, may I ask the trooper questions?
No, I'm trying to stay with the document here. No, I don't have one right now. The board does. I think we're trying to read it.
Say aye.
Oh, yes, yeah. We're trying to read all this, and just give us a minute, because again, we're at a little. The name I had just called for the hearing before you is the name that's on this letter. Is he scheduled for a hearing here?
Yes, he was. I think he wrote an email on Thursday of this past week for 72 hours to postpone the meeting.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, just as I was reading all these documents, I started seeing the name that I just called, so I was a little confused for a second. More than anything, to make sure I had the right document.
Yeah.
Continue, sir.
All right. So may I now question?
Yes, sir.
So initially, what's the purpose behind my restriction, which reads the valid only between ... transporting business firearms or property as an employee?
Good, I'll take a quick on question 23. As a reason for the handgun permit, and a good substantial reason for this permit, after looking at a review of the documentation, we provided, a letter from Carlos Cup, as well as articles of incorporation for the LLC, and in my opinion, your restriction states everything, just not business, but also transporting business firearms like you want it. Transporting property as you want it. Those are your four reasons for the, that you want the permit to list it down, and I think that's exactly what happened in your case.
So I think initially I did ask for an unrestricted permit, and then said if there were to be restrictions in place.
Right, and then I give you exactly that.
Yes. So would my permit as written allow for the transportation of customer firearms, including suppressors for testing?
As long as you can articulate that you're doing business, you can, that's fine.
But I don't think that while doing business
If you're
is,
doing any business activity for the business that you work for, and you can articulate that, if it's going to the bank and making deposits, if it's transferring firearms, then you're within your restriction.
so as I read this, and I could be wrong, of course, that valid only between residents engaged or actively involved in financial business transactions, transporting business firearms or property as an employee of or same. I agree completely that going to and from the bank is a financial business transaction. I do not see how transporting a customer's firearm for testing and repair, which I often have to do.
Is that business related?
Yes, but the permit does not say business-related activities.
It says transporting business firearms, business property.
Right. So it is unclear to me whether or not a customer's firearm would be property of the business.
If you're working within the business, you're doing something with someone's firearm, it's business related, then that is business activity, and you're covered.
Okay. So to me, that kind of exemplifies the unclearness of the permit.
What is the date of your commit position?
Does it have that?
I don't think
That's an
he,
expiration.
Expires 8/31/2017. That's just the end of my first month.
I mean, does it have the date of issue on it?
I do not believe so.
we approved it on July 22nd. It was mailed out on July 27th.
Okay,
So,
Trevor, I know, my question to you is, I have your SOP as a reference, not looking at it as binding, but I mean, the paragraph where it just states, business owner valid only while conducting business as owner, or valid only while conducting business as employee position of and name of the business. Why would he not just have that generic print that anytime he's doing business, transactions with the company, as to all the specifics that I'm hearing you say right after that?
Just be business, for the regular business restriction.
Yes, sir.
I mean, we could do it that way. Mr. Siegel, wanted just to, I just wanted to clarify more. He asked for it, and, his reasoning, wanted to make sure transporting firearms is in there. I said, hey, it makes it more clear for him to say /transporting firearms /property. It is just.
You were accommodating and it's created a confusion.
It's covered under the business. Yeah, I thought it was.
I also believe that the standard operating procedure was published after I applied for the permit. I believe it was in September it was published.
Yeah, well, I see it revised August 24th of 2015, but I guess maybe, let me clarify my question. The terminology you would use on the permit today, does that satisfy this issue?
Not especially, kind of later.
I mean, you're working for someone else, you're not
Correct.
a business owner.
Correct.
I understand the business that you're engaged in, and I understand you're concerned about ambiguity as everybody is with permit. But if it has, while engaged in business activities for engaged armament, that covers what your concerns were?
For that aspect of it, yes, but it does not address what I was talking about later. While I'm not a business owner, I am responsible for opening and closing the shop, so I always have keys to the shop on it. It's unclear to me whether or not that is covered by possessing or transporting business property, because the keys are obviously the property of the business. That would be a question I have for the trooper.
I'm reading the letter here from Engaged Armament. It has all the things that you've listed that you do for the company. But because you are an employee, that's the rationale or reason why you're getting a permit. And when I read this, it says in addition to financial transactions, Mr. Siegel engages in on behalf of the Engaged Armament. It is imperative this permit allows him to carry a firearm while in possession of business property. Such property often includes firearms, ammunition, and other articles that, if stolen, would put the public at risk. Completely understand that statement. I'm just, again, why would this not, if you're covered under anytime you're doing business transactions,
Right.
Why does that not satisfy your need?
So I think the possession of the keys and the issue with, it's relatively easy to find out where I live. I have passed out probably 2,000 cards at this point in time. When I notarize designated collector applications, Maryland State Police make me put my home address on the bottom of it. It is relatively difficult for people to say, oh, I don't know him, if they are in our local area. I think for me, whether or not I'm leaving to go to work or leaving to go to the grocery store then work, it's hard for me to articulate that I'm not at more danger just because of the place in which I'm leaving to go to as to where I am.
Well, I understand your concern, especially having keys on your person as you're traveling home, unless you're being stalked during your personal duties, going to the grocery store, that's a different matter.
Okay.
But I mean, you're approaching home, you've got your pistol, you're armed, you're still you're in the mode of going home and or going to work. And once you get home, that's a different matter. Your home is burglarized, the keys are in your person and your home, that's a totally different matter.
Yes, I agree completely, but I think keys being on me when I'm leaving work also,
Yes.
I think that puts the public at much more danger and me myself at much more risk.
But you're still technically under the jurisdiction of leaving your workplace, whether you're traveling home. And if I'm not mistaken, no different than any security person. They have approximately, 2 to 3 hours, I believe it is, that they have if they're carrying a a duty arm or firearm to get home. Am I
I'm
wrong?
sorry, who's that?
So there's a
any
temporal
security
limit in
person.
which my permit is good after I leave work?
No, I'm
Oh,
just saying,
okay.
I'm just saying that you're going home. You've got the property of the business with you. It's your responsibility, as it is, as you're carrying your firearm, to be responsible for the firearm and be responsible for the property of the business,
As in the keys?
as a keys. So, I mean,
So I think that, so when I have keys on me at all times, it's not as if I go home, drop off the keys, and then would go back out. If the alarm goes off after business hours,
you have to respond,
correct.
correct.
I'm not sure whether or not that response unarmed would be the smartest thing.
I wouldn't think it would be either.
So-
You would be armed, having to respond, you would call the police,
Correct.
you're en route to.
Typically, the alarm company calls police too.
I'm just saying,
So I would have to go home first. This is correct.
I thought you were saying
No,
that you were home.
I think what Ms. White's trying to say to you is that you carry the keys all the time, you're in business all the time, your permit is essentially a 24/7 permit, the way it's written.
So my concern with that, I agree completely with that interpretation. My concern would be whether or not someone stopping me would agree with that interpretation, for the subjectiveness of, are you within this
You
paragraph
have
on
this
that?
very well-written letter by your employer. It would make sense for you if you chose, if you're concerned about any officer who may stop you,
Mhm.
I would laminate this and keep it, okay? And this is very well written. And also, the employer or the owner of the business also has a set of keys, right?
Yes.
You're his backup.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've got everything here.
Yeah, I mean, it says, I agree, I mean, it states it very clearly, while you were in the possession of business property, you know, he's addressing and articulating all the paragraphs, everything is relevant to weapons. You're making the argument because you got the set of keys, that it puts you at a different risk, I guess, is what you're trying to say to us.
Yes, sir.
Any more questions from the board?
No.
I have a question. In your write-up, you say every permit issued contains a restriction which reflects the applicant's good and substantial reason for the handgun permit. Does that include self-defense?
If he, which you're not in this, everything that he submitted.
Not he, you say every permit issued. So it,
If they submitted documentation, of something happening that would, lead to having a non-restricted permit for self-defense, they had documented, say, something like, you know, threats, or then it could be, but the good substantial reason.
If
The
it's-
Siegel's particular situation is all referring to business.
it would say,
And if he had some additional documentation that he was being threatened besides this business, you know, something of that nature. I mean,
no, I'm just trying to get, I'm just trying to understand if I've never seen this before, that every permit issued contains a restriction. Now
Yeah.
that, I can understand that every business permit that is issued contains it contains a restriction, it's on the permit. What would go on just a self-defense permit, which was not involved in, let's say a police officer, a retired police officer, and, you know, or an attorney or whatever, it was retired now, and is applying for a permit, which is just a self-defense permit, because of impending, they applied apparent impending danger. Would they?
It would be assumed risk, so yeah.
Would you just say because of assumed risk?
No, it would say, it would be, if they were a retired police officer, it would say, it would be a non-restricted permit.
Just be a non-restricted permit,
And
and
if
it
they were
would be.
within the MSB policy, if they have everything within the 1 year and stuff, then
Okay, I was just,
retired correctional officer, like that, yes.
Do you agree that essentially Mr. Siegel's permit would cover him?
I believe
24/7?
Mr. Siegel's, if he's doing business 24/7 and he can articulate that, if he gets, has to do something at 3 in the morning at the shop or stays late one night, then it's business. It doesn't matter, there's not a time or day or anything like that on there. As long as Mr. Siegel is doing business, I think restriction covers it.
I guess my question is, why put a restriction on it? Because it's a business permit. That's it. Okay.
And it's,
Any other questions? Can you make a motion from the floor?
Make a motion that we do not modify, change the modification of Mr. Siegel's permit.
We have a motion on the floor from Ms. Patty West to sustain the state police's position on the business-related license. Do I have a second on that motion?
Second.
We have a second by Ms. Courtney White. Any other discussion?
I think I agree with the motion, because I think essentially the restriction is so vague that it's unnecessary, but I think it's covered 24 hours a day. And that being said, I would think he would be protected in a situation where something might come up. All he has to do is refer back to the board's decision.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to sustain the Maryland State's business-related restrictions on the handgun permit. All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? 4 in the affirmative. And Mr. Rabanalis, how do you say his name? Rabanalis. Is definitely not showing up here.
Correct.
Okay. That's all we have on the itinerary for tonight. Is there any other board business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Jimenez made a motion to adjourn, and I have a second.
Second. Sorry, I'm sorry.